Hello, and welcome everyone to this webinar titled What is MedDRA and How is it used? I'm Carolyn Wilson and work as a medical officer at the MSSO, and I will be your instructor today, and am supported by my colleague Leander. So together we will take you through this webinar, which will last for about 2 hours. Leander mentioned already that we would like to make this webinar interactive, so please, during the session, please submit your questions or send us your comments through the question panel. And I will allow as much time as possible for questions both during the course and also at the end of the presentation. We will start with 2 standard slides with some relevant information about MedDRA and this training material. ICH adopted the development of MedDRA in the mid-1990s and finally became the owner of the terminology. ICH then, on contract, appointed the MSSO to take care of the maintenance and further development of the terminology based on user feedback, to provide and organize corresponding training, and to administer the MedDRA licenses. And all these activities of the MSSO are overseen by the so-called ICH MedDRA Steering Committee, with members of the regulatory bodies and pharmaceutical industry associations in Europe, the US and Japan, Health Canada, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agencies, MedDRA in UK, and the WHO as an observer. And since May 2025, new members have joined the group, namely the Chinese National Medical Products Administration, or short NMPA, the Saudi Food and Drug Authority, or SFDA, and a member of the IFPMA, or International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations, as an observer. So quite a large group. ICH is not only the owner of MedDRA itself, but also owns this training material. It is protected worldwide. You may use the slides with the exception of the MedDRA and ICH logos, but will have to clearly indicate that ICH owns the copyright. Also, any adaptations of the slides have to be clearly labeled. The second bullet point refers to warranty and liability issues you should be aware of, and the third bullet point is not relevant for today. Now let me provide you with an overview on what we will cover today. We will first talk about the MedDRA background and its governance. We will then address its scope, structure, and its characteristics, and then look into how MedDRA is maintained and look at some helpful tools and documents provided that you can use as a subscriber. So the MedDRA browsers you can use to browse the terminology and look for appropriate terms for coding purposes. Also the EMVA tool that can be used to compare different versions of MedDRA. And I will also demonstrate some features of the browser with some information about its functionalities. Afterwards, we will discuss MedDRA coding in general and 2 important documents you should be familiar with, the so-called points to consider, or PTC documents. And at the end of the presentation, we will talk about the standardized MedDRA queries, or SMQs, that were developed to assist in data retrieval, presentation, and analysis of MedDRA-coded data. And as mentioned before, we will conclude with a question and answer session, but we will address your questions throughout the session as well. The next 2 slides now explain about the polling. Leander has mentioned already that we will be using quiz questions during this webinar. If you would like to join the quizzes and participate in the examples today, there are 2 ways to do so. The easiest way is to scan this QR code with your smartphone or tablet. So if you are ready, please do so. Or you may enter the indicated web address paulf.com into the URL bar at the top of your internet browser in your computer, tablet, or cell phone. And it will then take you directly to a log on screen, and you'll be asked for a username. The Paul is completely anonymous, so you don't need to enter your name, but enter my name, please. It is Carol N. Wills 584. No spaces. Nothing more to be entered, just click join. And Liana has put these credentials in the chat as well. You don't have to get under time pressure because you will be able to see these credentials on each slide that relates to the quizzes. So let Leander know when if you have lost connection to the Paul. So now let's see whether the technology works. Oh, it does. Good to see that. So I see Indonesia, India, people in the US. It's quite early for you, early birds in the US. Turkey, merhaba. Spanish, buenos días, bon dia to Portugal. Yeah, Europe is quite crowded. I see people, yeah, what is it? Lots of, I just say, I assume that many of the countries in Europe are joining. So welcome everybody. Nice to meet you in cyberspace. The application seems to work. Thank you for joining. Let us now start with the first topic on our agenda, the MedDRA background and governance. What is MedDRA? MedDRA stands for Medical Dictionary for Regulatory Activities. It's an acronym. Actually, it's not a dictionary with an alphabetical list of medical terms and their definition. It is rather a terminology that includes and organizes a wide range of medical terms. MedDRA structures these terms not in alphabetical order, but based on a defined system we will talk about in a minute. It is important to realize that MedDRA does not contain definitions. So when confronted with medical terms you are not familiar with and that need to be coded, you will have to use some reliable medical references, like the Dorland's dictionary, medical textbooks, or online references like the Merck manual, for instance, that is available online for free. So let us now start with one general question. What do you think are the benefits of using MedDRA at all? What are the benefits? Why was MedDRA at all developed and implemented by many regulatory authorities and now also by pharmaceutical companies? Consistency, yes. Standardization, exactly. Unique terms. Standardized safety reporting. Standardization, yes. Standardization, standardized approach towards ADR reporting, not only adverse drug reactions, it's for everything that is reported, yes. Regulation for standardization, standardized medical coding, exactly. Standardized communication for medical experts, exactly. So thank you for joining. It's all about standardization and harmonization. So MedDRA is a clinically validated international medical terminology. It's a standardized terminology. And with the standardization achieved with MedDRA, we are now speaking the same language when talking about safety data from pre-marketing in clinical development to post-marketing in pharmacovigilance. And MedDRA has replaced legacy terminologies. There were many legacy terminologies, some of them even customized. CoSTART, for instance, that was mainly used in clinical studies, and WHOART, that was mainly used in post-marketing. And it is not only used by biopharmaceutical industry or scientific organizations, but also by regulatory authorities around the globe. The terminology is used for entering and coding clinical data, but it also has features that support data retrieval and analysis, as well as presentation of clinical safety data. We will not be able to go into very much detail about operational coding and data retrieval today, but you have the option to attend additional webinars that we offer. 2 for coders that are called Coding Basics and Advanced MedDRA Coding, and additional 2 webinars for MedDRA users who work in the data retrieval and analysis area called Data Analysis and Query Building with MedDRA, and another one that addresses the standardized MedDRA queries or SMQs. We will touch these topics today, but rather on a more general level. In addition to that, we also have for coders, we have additional webinars for medication error, medication use issue reports, so how to code them. And we have in a workshop format for more advanced coders, the Let's Code Together webinars. So the explanation of MedDRA's purpose holds the key words of our session today. Standardization of exchange of clinical information. And you got it right when answering the first question. MedDRA allows us to use a common language when exchanging clinical information. It is used for product evaluation, for monitoring product safety, for communication of clinical specifics and activities related to product oversight. Standardization and harmonization that has been achieved with MedDRA is further enhanced by other initiatives like the implementation of ICH standards for electronic reporting and data exchange, like the E2B standards. And when it comes to coding and data retrieval and analysis for medicinal products, MedDRA supports not only pharmaceuticals or drugs, but also biologics, vaccines, and drug-device combination products. From a governance point of view, the ICH MedDRA Steering Committee that is appointed by the ICH Assembly provides oversight of MedDRA-related activities, including the activities of the MSSO. And the next slide now explains the relationship of the ICH Steering Committee and the MSSO. ICH owns MedDRA, and the ICH Steering Committee contracts with the MSSO to maintain the terminology. It has oversight on all operations of the MSSO by meeting regularly with the MSSO management, setting subscription rates and approving future development plans and MSSO services. Membership does not only include ICH regulatory authorities, but also industry associations. You saw that before. The MSSO then provides international support to MedDRA users by administration of the licensees, training offers like the one we have today, user group meetings, etc. But it also maintains and further develops the terminology based on user feedback. Its partner organization is the Japanese Maintenance Organization, or JMO, that takes care of the Japanese language MedDRA and of the support of the Japanese MedDRA users. And as mentioned before, all these MSSO activities are overseen by the MedDRA Steering Committee. Here it is further specified where, in which areas, MedDRA is used. It is used throughout the whole product development process, from phase 1 to phase 3 for new drug applications, and after approval in phase 4 studies and in pharmacovigilance activities. Please note that preclinical data, preclinical testing are not within the scope of MedDRA. MedDRA is not only used in industry databases, but in regulatory databases as well. It is used in a number of documents like ICSRs, safety summary reports, in clinical study reports, investigator brochures for compiling company core safety information, marketing applications, publications, when summarizing safety information and prescribing information as well, and in some countries, like in the US, also for advertising purposes and like in TV commercials. So, any questions so far, Leander?
No questions. Thanks, Caroline.
Okay. Good to hear you. Good that you hear me.
Absolutely. You're loud and clear. Thank you.
Yeah, it was stressful today. So let's move on and talk about MedDRA's scope, structure, and its characteristics. So this is really a key slide that shows what is in the scope of MedDRA or what type of medical terms is covered by MedDRA. In the blue circle, you will find all medical terms and conditions that are within its scope. So it incorporates terms for medical conditions like diagnosis and clinical signs and symptoms, pharmacogenetic terms, investigational terms, not only the test names but also test results, medical surgical procedures, terms that relate to the medical, social, and family history of patients, toxicologic issues, terms that relate to product quality issues, device-related issues, and also many terms that relate to medication errors and product use issues. And last but not least, also, of course, in the scope of MedDRA are the standardized MedDRA queries. On the other hand, MedDRA excludes terms, for instance, those that relate to frequencies, frequency qualifiers, unless such information is medically relevant, like frequent micturition, for instance, or frequent bowel movements. The same holds true for indicators of severity. You will only find a few of them on PT level where clear medical definitions exist for the characterization of the condition, like in the case of the PT severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS. You will not find any numerical values for investigational results, but qualifiers like normal, abnormal, increased, decreased, high, low, positive, negative, for instance. No numerical values. Also, patient demographic terms are not included, relating to race, gender, age, etc., with the exception again of terms where this information regarding to age, gender, etc., is relevant based on medical considerations, like for instance when it comes to male or female infertility, male or female breast cancer, senile dementia, for instance, or infantile acne or neonatal jaundice. So you find these terms, but only if these are really important criteria for the distinction of certain medical conditions. MedDRA is not a drug dictionary, nor is it a medical device equipment terminology or diagnostic product dictionary. So you won't find any brand names in the terminology, but there are several terms that include generic drug names, like for instance the PT thalidomide embryopathy. And you won't find brand names for devices, but terms for specific device types like catheters, joint prostheses, cardiac pacemakers, etc. And finally, MedDRA does not contain any terms that refer to clinical trial study design, like double-blind, placebo-controlled, etc. So this is really important to remember in order to understand what is covered by MedDRA and what is not covered by MedDRA. And we will readdress this topic during this webinar when talking about change request, for instance. We now come to the structure of MedDRA. I told you that MedDRA is a terminology that has a defined, where the terms are ordered, structured in a defined manner. And one of the characteristics of MedDRA when it comes to its structure is its hierarchy. MedDRA has a systematic 5-level hierarchical structure, starting with the system organ class on the top and the high-level group terms and under them the high-level terms underneath, that then group the PTs, the preferred terms. They represent the medical concept level. The PT level is used for data retrieval, presentation, and analysis purposes. And the PTs then group the lowest level terms, or LLTs, that are used for data entry and operational coding. You can see that starting from the top, MedDRA gets more and more granular and specific, that is from 27 SOCs to nearly 90,000 LLTs. For coding purposes, you would browse MedDRA to find the most specific and accurate LLT for the reported patient information among these more than nearly 90,000 LLTs. Please note that only British English is used at the PT level and above, British English. It is only on the LLT level where you would find terms in American English. So if you would look for a specific preferred term and you would use American English for your search in the browser, you may run into problems and you would not find any results. So be aware of that. British English from preferred term level and above. So here we have the 27 system organ classes. Some SOCs group terms based on their manifestation site, like cardiac disorders, eye disorders, nervous system disorders, vascular disorders. Other system organ classes group terms based on the etiology of the respective conditions, like for instance congenital, familial, and genetic disorders, or immune system disorders, or injury, poisoning, procedural complications, infections, infestations. There is also a SOC that groups terms that relate to product quality issues. That's the product issues system organ class. The SOC social circumstances contains terms that describe the social context of patients, like lifestyle issues, family issues, etc. Please note that terms from this SOC should normally not be used for coding adverse events. These terms are rather used for coding medical history of patients. And the SOC surgical and medical procedures, here it is, group terms based on their purpose. So you will need a good knowledge about these 27 system organ classes and their content in order to get a better feel on where to search in MedDRA, the full MedDRA hierarchy, to find a specific medical concept or term. Let's look at an example for the MedDRA hierarchy. In this instance, it is SOC cardiac disorders. Under the system organ class, you will find 10 HLGTs, representing the main types of cardiac disorders. Here we have selected the HLGT cardiac arrhythmias, so one of the 10. Under this HLGT, there are several HLTs grouping PTs for the different types of arrhythmias, like supraventricular arrhythmias, ventricular arrhythmias, etc. The HLT shown on this slide is HLT Rate and Rhythm Disorders, NEC. And NEC stands for Not Elsewhere Classified. NEC groupings are only found on HLGT or HLT level. They represent somehow miscellaneous groupings of terms that do not fit into any other HLT or HLGT. One of the PTs under this HLT is the PT arrhythmia, because it's a vague term. The arrhythmia is not specified. That's why it's grouped under the NEC grouping. And this PT groups a number of LLTs that are not all shown on the slide, only a few of them. LLTs represent synonyms, quasi-synonyms, or lexical variants of the PT term, and also colloquial, patient-friendly terms. The LLT level is the data entry level, and the granularity on the LLT level provides guidance to medical coders, thereby facilitating accurate and consistent coding. And please note that each LLT is only linked to one PT. Now let's look at the LLTs under PT arrhythmia that are shown on this slide. Arrhythmia NOS stands for arrhythmia not otherwise specified. It doesn't make a lot of difference whether you select arrhythmia NOS or LLT arrhythmia, but it is good practice only using the NOS terms when it is explicitly reported in the verbatim that a given condition could not be further specified. So if just arrhythmia is reported in the verbatim, without any further information, it would be good practice to select LLT arrhythmia and not to assume that it is, so to say, NOS. And LLT dysrhythmias represents a synonym for arrhythmia. Some of the LLTs are labeled non-current, like the LLT other specified cardiac dysrhythmias on this slide. It is marked in red, and this is also how the non-current terms are highlighted in the MedDRA browser. Non-current terms are only found on the LLT level. LLTs are set non-current when identified as ambiguous, truncated, misspelled, or when not following MedDRA rules in the case of combination terms. They are flagged and should not be used for ongoing coding, but they are not removed from the terminology in order to preserve the information from legacy cases. So if you have logged a clinical database, for instance, in a previous MedDRA version, you would still be able to find these terms in the latest version, although they were made non-current, and could map them to another suitable current LLT. An example for a non-current LLT is the CoStar term nausea and vomiting, representing a combination term that is represented by two separate PTs in MedDRA. It has the non-current status and is grouped under PT vomiting. Another example would be the ambiguous term angina, a term that is most frequently used to describe angina pectoris, but that may also relate to angina tonsillaris, for instance. Each MedDRA term is assigned an 8-digit numeric code. The codes are assigned sequentially and are not at all expressive. Important to know. Meaning that you cannot predict or deduct where a specific MedDRA term would be located in the MedDRA hierarchy based on its numerical code. Codes are used in databases and are relevant for electronic submissions, but they are also very helpful when it comes to translations. Because MedDRA is a multi-language terminology and is currently available in 24 languages, which are highlighted in blue here on this slide. Many of the newer European translations are to support the Electronic Prescribing Information Initiative of the European Medicines Agency. We are working on additional translations, as you can see on this image, and the MSSO will provide estimated release dates for these languages as they become available. The same concepts have the same code in all MedDRA translations. In the center, you can see the numerical code for the medical concept headache and its respective translations. This feature is very useful for communication in all languages and especially for the translation of safety information for local labeling purpose, for instance, so for the colleagues working in the regulatory area. Another feature of the MedDRA structure is its multi-axiality. So we have talked about the hierarchy of MedDRA, and the other feature that is important that organizes the terms that are included in MedDRA is the multi-axiality. And this multi-axiality allows for representation of PTs in multiple system organ classes based on medical considerations. So what is meant by that? Let's take the example of PT dyspnea, representing the medical concept shortness of breath. If I would ask you in what SOC you would expect this PT to be in, some of you may say in SOC respiratory based on its manifestation side, but others may say in SOC cardiac disorders because dyspnea is an important symptom of cardiac disease. And both of you would be right, because you will find PT dyspnea under both system organ classes, one based on the manifestation side, but also based on the etiology of the condition. So this allows for data presentation and analysis based on different medical considerations, depending on your area of interest and also depending on product-specific considerations. So in order to achieve standardization for cumulative data output of MedDRA-coded data, all PTs with multiple SOC linkages need to have a default or primary SOC assignment. Remember, MedDRA is about standardization. So in order to standardize this cumulative data output, we have the primary SOC assignment. So this will determine which SOC represents the multi-axial PT during cumulative data output and presentation of data for integrated safety summaries, periodic safety reporting, etc. The primary SOC is defined by MedDRA. This feature prevents double counting of events as respiratory or cardiac condition in our previous example of the PT dyspnea. And the standardization that is achieved by the primary SOC presentation of data is required by regulators as well and has to be followed. So deliberate changes, even if your database allows for doing so, will not be accepted. Usually the primary SOC assignment is hard-coded in the coding systems, but if you have a system that allows you to choose, you must always select the primary SOC that is defined by MedDRA for your cumulative data output. Let's look at the rules that are applied for the primary SOC assignment within MedDRA. So it's all defined by MedDRA. If the respective PT has only one SOC linkage, obviously this SOC is automatically its primary SOC. PTs for diseases and clinical signs and symptoms have their prime manifestation site as primary SOC. But there are three exceptions. Firstly, congenital and hereditary anomalies always have the SOC congenital as primary SOC. Secondly, neoplasm terms always have SOC neoplasms as primary SOC, with the exception of cysts and polyps, which have their prime manifestation site as primary SOC. And thirdly, infection and infestation terms always have SOC infections as primary SOC. Again, most PTs are grouped based on their manifestation site, with the exception of these three SOCs: congenital, neoplasms, infections. Let's look at an example again for multi-axiality in this instance, using the PT obesity cardiomyopathy. It has SOC cardiac disorders as primary SOC based on its manifestation site, and a secondary linkage to SOC metabolism and nutrition disorders based on its etiology, the etiology of the condition. Please note that a PT can have a number of secondary linkages, not just one or two. Especially in SOC congenital, there are PTs that represent very complex congenital anomalies affecting multiple body sites. And they may have up to 7 secondary SOC linkages, like for example the PT charge syndrome. All these additional linkages are called secondary linkages. They are all equal. There is no ranking among them. And by the way, more than 40% of all PTs in MedDRA are multi-axial. Here another example. We are looking at the PT influenza. It has SOC infections and infestations as primary SOC and a secondary linkage to the site of manifestation, that is SOC respiratory disorders. This is one of the exception SOCs I have shown before. Remember, these are the SOC congenital, SOC neoplasms, and SOC infections. In general, however, the PTs are assigned a primary SOC based on the site of manifestation. So now, some quiz questions for you. Which of these concepts can be coded using MedDRA? Grade 4 adverse drug reaction, expired product administered, breast sounds abnormal, breast cancer female, X-ray machine, Hispanic, device contamination prior to use, wheelchair users, Voltaren, induced gastritis. Remember the image that I've shown earlier, what is included in MedDRA and what is excluded. So most of you got it right. Grade 4 is a severity condition. Severity of adverse reactions are captured elsewhere in the database. So as mentioned earlier, you will find only a few terms that contain severity indicators, like grading, grade 4, for instance, or mild, severe, moderate, whatsoever. Only if this is really part of a medical concept you will find them. So the grade 4 term cannot be coded using MedDRA. You won't find any of these terms. Wheelchair user, yes, it's a social circumstance. You will find that. X-ray machine is just a machine, so nothing, no information, no further information. Fully correct. This cannot be coded with MedDRA. Hispanic is just a demographic information, and it's not, doesn't tell anything. So it's if at all relevant, it's captured elsewhere in the database, but it cannot be coded with MedDRA. And the Voltaren, of course, is a trade name. So trade names, you won't find trade names in MedDRA. So that's why the Hispanic, the Voltaren, and the grade 4 is incorrect. All of the others are correct. And you have made the choice. Yeah. So as I said, grade 4 is incorrect, Voltaren is incorrect, severity indicator, trade name. So remember the rules, what is included and excluded from the MedDRA terminology. Another question. Is this statement true or false? Each LLT is linked to only one PT. Is it true? Does multi-axiality already start on LLT level? Or where does it start? Remember the two examples that I've shown earlier with the obesity, cardiomyopathy, and the influenza example. We started on the PT level in this graph. So we have a split of opinions. Let me close the poll. I mentioned that LLTs are only linked to one PT. Very important to remember. So multi-axiality starts on PT level. LLTs, you will only find a single LLT under one PT. Important to remember and to be aware of when using MedDRA, when working with MedDRA, especially in data retrieval. Each PT is linked to only one HLT. What about this one? True or false? Let's see. Yes. It's not true, of course. Let me close it. So Multiaxiality starts at PT level. So, and I've told you more than 40% of the PTs in MedDRA are multiaxial. So PT, of course, can be linked to more than one HLT. When thinking about what type of terms are included in MedDRA and the non-currency of MedDRA terms, what do you think? Which are non-current MedDRA LLTs? And here more than one answer may be correct. Remember, what type of terms are made non-current in MedDRA? Ambiguous terms, misspellings, truncated terms, combination terms that are represented by separate PTs or separate PTs in MedDRA. What do you think? Let me have a look. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Let me close it. All of them are non-current. MI is an ambiguous abbreviation, may relate to myocardial infarction, mesenteric ischemia, mitral insufficiency, or mental illness, for instance. Insomnia with sleep apnea is a combination term that is represented by two separate PTs in MedDRA. Bloody drainage could be a surgical procedural term referring to the systematic withdrawal of blood, or a non-surgical term referring to a discharge, a secretion used for excretion of liquids from the body. And bloating is a truncated term that does not follow the MedDRA naming conventions. So all of them are non-current, but you will find them in MedDRA as non-current terms. And what about this question? In which socks would you expect to find PT colon cancer? Colon cancer. So think about the manifestation side and the prioritization, the primary SOC assignments in MedDRA. Some of you may have problems to really hit the correct button here, but most of you are right here. Of course, neoplasm SOC would be the primary SOC because this is one of the exception SOCs, and the manifestation site would be captured with a secondary linkage to SOC gastrointestinal disorders. So fully correct. So these are the two linkages. So gastrointestinal representing manifestation site and neoplasms always being the primary SOC for neoplastic conditions. And in which SOC would you expect to find PT cerebrovascular accident? Again, think about the manifestation site first, cerebrovascular, and then, yeah, the name already indicates the linkages, to be honest. Cerebrovascular accident. Exactly. So the manifestation site is, of course, nervous system disorders, and the etiology is captured via secondary linkage to vascular disorders. It has no, of course, so the assignment of the secondary linkage is really basic. So with the vascular disorders secondary linkage, you already capture the fact whether it's embolic or thrombotic or hemorrhagic CVA. So that's why blood cardiac is not considered in for secondary assignments. It's just two linkages, one to nervous system disorders and one to vascular disorders in this instance, and most of you got it right. So any questions, Leander?
Not at this time. I've answered a couple, and you're going to demonstrate some of it. So
Okay.
I've asked the person to come back if it doesn't. Thank you.
Okay. So What I would like to mention is that this training will not be able to provide you, of course, with all details of MedDRA definitions and specifics. So to even better understand MedDRA, please refer to the MedDRA Introductory Guide. This document is available in many of the MedDRA languages and is updated with each MedDRA version. It describes specific MedDRA rules and conventions as well as MedDRA naming conventions that are relevant to better understand MedDRA classifications. So for example, per convention, the abdominal wall is considered a gastrointestinal structure, and the pharynx and diaphragm are considered respiratory structures. So I would highly recommend to study this document thoroughly, especially for beginners or less experienced MedDRA users. But it is really helpful, and I'm sure that you will find it useful as well. So let me quickly show you where to find it. I hope it works here. Here we are on the MedDRA website. How to use support documentation. And here you find the MedDRA versions, the latest MedDRA version on top. And here is the introductory guide for MedDRA version 28.0. And if I click on it, then it opens, and you see some of the information that you can see here. Body side considerations, what I've just told you, abdominal wall, chest wall. Chest wall is classified as musculoskeletal structure. Eyelid is classified as a structure of the eye. So all of these, how the word order is handled, the MedDRA codes, numerical values, aggravations, NOS and NSC terms are explained, gender-specific terms. So some of the topics that we have addressed already today, but it's a nice summary to really look at least I will show you the content, to look at this introduction and the structural elements of the terminology and the levels and rules and conventions. So, and if you are interested in certain system organ classes, how they are organized, this starts on page 24. But the first 23 pages are really relevant if you are not familiar with MedDRA yet. So let me switch back. Here we are. So next we will now talk about the maintenance of the terminology. And MedDRA, of course, has to be maintained in order to keep up to date with medical science and to meet also the expectations of the users in regulatory agencies, pharmaceutical industry, etc. The maintenance of MedDRA is mainly triggered by the MedDRA users, who can send up to 100 change requests per month to the MSSO for consideration, so quite a number. For example, you may think that a primary SOC assignment of a PT is not appropriate, of course, considering the MedDRA rules. As mentioned before, you should not change the primary SOC assignment in your database, but you have the option to submit a respective change request. You will get a response from the MSSO within 7 to 10 working days when submitting proposals for simple changes. So simple changes meaning affecting the LLT and PT level only. Complex changes affecting higher levels of the terminology will be posted mid-year for discussion in the user community, and based on the user feedback, a final decision will be taken. There are 2 releases of new MedDRA versions per year. One that includes complex changes above the PT level, called complex or major version release, on the 1st of March, and a simple release on September 1st of each year that will only affect the LLT and PT level. So in a few days from now, version 28.1 will be released. So this will be a simple release only affecting the LLT and PT level. And the latest one was the version 28.0 release that was a complex release. For the submission of change requests, the MSSO has developed a web-based tool called WebCR. The slide provides you with the URL, but you will also find the link within the support section of the MedDRA website on the change request information page, together with a detailed user guide on how to use it. The tool has a really user-friendly interface that is really easy to work with, so it guides you through all the steps. Please note that change requests must be submitted in English language. You have the option to submit change requests for MedDRA terms and SMQs, standardized MedDRA queries, and also change requests for translations. When submitting a single change request or a batch of them, you will get an immediate confirmation from the MSSO that this batch or this change request was received. The tool allows users to check the change request history back to version 5.1, and this is a very useful feature. It is really helpful to check the history before submitting your request. Other users may have submitted the same request before, and it may have been accepted already for the next MedDRA version. So you would not have to submit this request again and save time not doing so. But it may also have been rejected before, and then you will be able to review the rationale for the rejection and can then decide whether a resubmission would make sense or not. So this is a really helpful feature. Here, a screenshot of the new WebCR platform landing page. In order to access the tool, you will need your user ID and password, and the tool then guides users to enter all the required information. Here, an example of the user interface for submission of a request for a new LLT, for instance. As you can see, the proposal for the PT linkage is optional here, but a justification is always required, always needed, best with supporting documentation provided either as an attachment or by providing links. In addition to single change requests, there may be more systematic issues affecting multiple LLTs or PTs that you would like to address with the MSSO. For example, MedDRA terms that represent similar conditions like inflammation at different body sites may have been handled inconsistently over time within the hierarchy. The MSSO does proactive changes internally when needed, but such changes may also be suggested by the MedDRA users. They are to be sent to the MSSO help desk in this instance with a justification, not via the change request tool. As an example, you can see a proactive request that was actually provided by myself when still working in pharmaceutical industry, asking for the review of the placement of bruising and contusion terms. And reason was that some LLTs containing the information bruise or bruising or contusion were linked to only injury PTs for the affected organ or site, fully losing the hemorrhage information on PT level. For example, the LLT renal contusion was linked to PT renal injury in an earlier version of MedDRA. And because data retrieval and analysis is performed on PT level, such placements could lead to missing relevant cases when looking for bleeding events in this instance. So please note that for this type of request, MSSO will need more time to come to a final conclusion because it affects, of course, more terms. And I would really encourage everybody to submit change requests and to contribute to the maintenance of MedDRA, even if, it takes time and effort, but this effort will keep the terminology up to date and make it most useful for the MedDRA user community. So please do so. If you come across some issues or if you find no suitable term in MedDRA for a given reported medical condition, submit a change request. Now, which of the following terms could be considered for addition to MedDRA? Again, thinking about what is included and what is excluded in MedDRA. Which of those could be considered? It's only one in this instance. Drug-induced weight gain, mild diarrhea, AF, glucose above 100 milligram per deciliter, or precancerous oral lesion. So drug-induced, I mentioned this earlier, you could add the drug-induced to each and every, more or less each and every term in MedDRA. Drug relationship is captured in separate database fields. We don't have these drug-induced. Some of them, yes, if they are really, if they represent medical concepts that are used, naming is used in the medical community, but it's really an exception. Severity indicators are only used when it's part of a medical term, medical definition. Mild diarrhea, the mildness of the diarrhea is captured elsewhere in the database. AF is an ambiguous abbreviation, could relate to atrial fibrillation or atrial flutter. And glucose above 100 milligram per deciliter, I mentioned it when showing the image with what is included, what is excluded in MedDRA. Numerical values for investigational results, you cannot find any in MedDRA. So the correct answer here is precancerous oral lesion. This would be an acceptable term because it represents a medical condition that really meets all the in- and exclusion criteria that are to be observed when adding terms to MedDRA. Any questions again, Leander?
Yeah, we had one question. Somebody just wanted to confirm, should we always code to the most detailed term available? For example, for an amputation, should we code simply amputation or use the most specific level available, e.g. below knee, above knee?
We will come to this in a minute when talking about specifically talking about MedDRA coding. Just wait a minute, we will address it. And yes, we will always code as specifically as possible.
Okay, great. That's it for now, Carol-Ann. Thank you.
Mhm. So questions we have. In the context of MedDRA content and versioning, I would also like to address related MedDRA tools like the MedDRA browsers and the MVAT tool. They are free to use by all MedDRA subscribers, and I will introduce and demonstrate some of their functionalities in the next few slides. So the MedDRA browsers are used, of course, to browse the terminology in order to find suitable terms for coding or suitable standardized MedDRA queries for data retrieval purposes. Out of the 3 MedDRA browsers that are provided by the MSSO, one is intended to be installed on local computers. So this is the MedDRA desktop browser. 2 are accessible via the internet, a mobile version for smartphones and tablet computers, and a version for use with laptop or desktop computers, the so-called web-based browser or WBB. You can see 2 URLs on the slide, one for the new web-based browser, and one for the legacy web-based browser. Both are currently available as we are still in the transition period, but towards the end of the year or so, the legacy web-based browser will be switched off. I will use the legacy browser in today's webinar, and some of you may already have looked into it. So today's session, just to make you aware, will not allow to give you a full introduction into the features and usage of the browser, but I will demonstrate the most relevant functionalities. If you would like to learn more, please refer to a recorded session where the look and feel of the legacy and the new browser are demonstrated in much more detail on our YouTube channel. I will show you at the end of the webinar where to find this YouTube channel. The new browser provides all functionalities of the legacy one, just to let you know, but the user interface looks different. And the desktop browser can be downloaded from the MedDRA website together with the release files of MedDRA and makes you independent from internet access. That's really nice. All three browsers require the entry of MedDRA ID of your organization and a password. They support viewing MedDRA and the SMQs and related searches in all MedDRA languages. They also have a language-specific interface, and the desktop browser and the web-based browser have the ability to export search results to local file systems. For coding purposes, the view of the primary and secondary link information and the advanced search options are very helpful to make your searches more focused and efficient. Some other features of the browsers mainly support data retrieval and analysis, like upload terms to run against SMQs, for instance. And if you are considering the submission of a change request to the MSSO and would like to see whether another MedDRA user has already submitted such a request, then the supplemental view of the browser is really useful. Please note that this functionality is not available in the desktop browser that you can upload on your own computer together with the MedDRA files, but it's available in the web-based browsers. And I will demonstrate these features in a minute. Here now a screenshot of the new interface of our updated web-based browser that was launched in December last year. And the desktop browser was also updated accordingly. The new updated version was actually released last month. So it looks the same, but again, all functionalities of the old versions of the browsers are considered. They are all available in the new updated browser versions. They just have a simpler look, a more streamlined interface, because the browsers, what we see, are mainly used for searching MedDRA in the MedDRA community, and that is why the focus of the interface is now on coding tasks, which really much more space on the screen for such tasks. In the old browser versions, search results were shown in a very small panel in the center of the user interface. And now it's more easy to use for coding purposes. But as mentioned, be aware all functionalities of the legacy browsers are still available in the updated versions of the browsers. The interface can be customized, meaning that you can accommodate your own preferences in the navigation bar, and this way you don't have to adapt the settings with each new browser session, so it's stored. Here you can see the search results for the medical term myelosclerosis, for instance. So it was searched, we searched for it, here it is, and here you see the term in the hierarchy. And here the same search but displayed in the legacy browser, it becomes really obvious that the user interface is much more busy with less space for search tasks. Yeah, so here you have the hit for myelosclerosis and here the hierarchy, but you have much more information in the interface, in the user interface. So now let me switch screens to give you a brief introduction to the basic functions of the legacy web-based browser. So I will use the legacy one today for search and coding purposes. So let me now switch again to the MedDRA homepage. Here we have the linkage to the legacy web-based browser. If I open it, oh, I don't want it in French, I want it in English, and here I log in. So here we have the legacy, the interface, user interface of the legacy browser. Some of you may have already used it, maybe. So what is really important are the legends, of course. So a blue square around the PT identifies a multi-axial primary PT, primary term, in its primary sock. A green square identifies a multi-axial PT in its secondary sock. A red square identifies a uniaxial primary term. Blue square around the sock identifies the primary sock. And here you see that the non-current LLT terms are marked in red. So the LLT is written in red, and also the square is red. Legends important. Then we have different configuration options here. You see all the languages that are available in MedDRA, so you can compare up to 3 languages in the browser. You can select the MedDRA version that you would like to look at, down to the first MedDRA version that was released, that is 2.1. And you can either search the SOC view for coding tasks or the SMQ view when you're looking for suitable standardized MedDRA queries for your retrieval tasks. And here you have either the released version, or if you would like to look at the current status of the next MedDRA version that will be released, for instance, the version 28.1 in 3 days from now, then you would select the supplemental English version. IMO view is only for internal purposes at the MSSO for the medical officers, so you will only see the release in supplemental English version. You can decide whether you would like to see the non-current terms and click here. If you click on the show codes, you will see everything with the numeric codes added to the respective MedDRA terms, but it makes it even more busy, the whole interface. MedDRA concept descriptions are important. MedDRA is not a dictionary, but there is explanations of medical terms, how they are interpreted, how they are classified in MedDRA. You see that they are grouped in alphabetical order, and you see concept descriptions for abuse, acute, addiction, how aggravated is interpreted, classified in MedDRA, how it is handled, application site, what does it mean, angina, arthritis, and it continues here. So if you are not familiar with a term, or if you're in doubt, try to find a concept description, but you of course will not find concept description for each and every medical condition in here. But especially also for the product quality terms and also for the medication error terms, there are quite a number here that really better explain what is meant by the respective MedDRA term, how they are interpreted and classified in the MedDRA hierarchy. You have direct links to the MedDRA documentation, and you have a very detailed user guide as well, and some features that are relevant for and useful for the data retrieval purposes. Now, let me show you the screen here. This is the search window. Here on the left-hand side, we have all the system organ classes listed in alphabetical disorders, and we can perform the so-called top-down searches in this window. So if we have, for instance, a term like insufficient kidney function insufficient, so we would look into renal and urinary disorders, SOC, and look for a suitable HLGT. And the best one that I can find here is renal disorders excluding nephropathies. Let's see what we can find here. And here we have the renal failure and impairment HLT. So this looks suitable for our reported condition. It was reported as insufficient kidney function without any further information. So we would select a very vague term like renal failure here, because we don't have any additional information, and look for the best approximation to our term. So insufficient kidney function, insufficiency renal would be the best approximation to our term. So in addition to the top-down search, we also have the option to actually search for a certain term. So if I would just enter kidney and in order to capture, it's always good to use truncated terms for the searches, because here you would capture insufficiency and insufficient, and would do a search. You see that we have 24 search results, and we also have the insufficiency renal here that we saw in our top-down search, and many others, among them also adrenal insufficiency terms. This makes our list much longer and more difficult to identify the actual relevant LLT. So for this purpose, we can use the advanced search option, and we could say we would like to have the kidney, of course, kidney insufficiency, but it should not contain adrenal. And then search again. And then our list, the hits is much shorter, and we can easily see that our insufficiency renal is also there. So that's what you can see, what you can do with a advanced search function. You can also use it for other purposes. If you have, for instance, the abbreviation MI, you would say exact match, because if you would do the basic search with MI, here it is, and search, the browser would tell you no, too many search results, yeah, because it would look for all MIs in each and every MedDRA term. So here you would need the advanced search option, and you would say MI exact match and search for it. And here it is, and you see it's, of course, because it's an ambiguous abbreviation, it has a status non-current. Okay, so your search can also be limited by selecting a certain SOC, like investigations, for instance. And if I would be interested in investigational terms that relate to renal function, and search, then we would get these terms. I would just do a right mouse click and say go to browser, and then I will be brought to this term and would be able to really explore the whole HLT here, renal function analysis, and look very, very efficiently into the terms that are available there, and would be able to select the best LLT for the reported medical condition. Now, the supplemental view, just to make it short, time is advancing. Supplemental terms. So you see that the screen changes in color to make you aware you are not looking into a released version of MedDRA. You are looking at the current status of the next version that will be released. So let's assume that you have a report of a HER2 hormone positive breast cancer. Very complex term, but important these are all features or characteristics of breast cancer that are relevant for the prognosis and also for the treatment of the affected patients. Excuse me. So when searching, you see there is a term, but it is marked with a green line. It is a new term that was added to version 28.1. So it will become available in a few days from now with the next MedDRA version release, but it's still not available in the currently released MedDRA version 28.0. So this is what you can do with a supplemental view. So let me go back to the released version and do the same search here. And you see that there's not such a term. You only have hormone receptor negative, positive, HER2 positive, negative. So we don't have the two positives as a term. So this will be added with the next MedDRA version release. So this was a brief overview. Are there any questions, Leander, regarding this browser review?
We had a couple of questions. When we receive an AE from spontaneous report, do we immediately classify it as an LLT?
So you would always code on the LLT level, or the other. How do you then perform the coding in your coding process? It really depends on the coding process that you're using in your organization, whether you're doing batch coding or whether you are coding in the cases. So it depends on the area, clinical studies or pharmacovigilance. So this cannot be answered, but you would always code to an LLT.
Thanks, Caroline. And we had one, just a clarification. Can you please confirm what uniaxial primary term is?
Yeah, let me show you a uniaxial term. What kind of term would be cardiac arrhythmia? Let me show you. Here we have the cardiac arrhythmia. If I click on it, you can see it in this window in the hierarchy. And you see that there is only one SOC assignment, that is cardiac disorders, because the term cardiac arrhythmia doesn't tell you anything about the origin, the etiology of the condition. So that's why it only has one SOC assignment. That is what uniaxiality means. One SOC assignment. Multi-axial means in addition to the primary SOC assignments, there are secondary SOC assignments. What you can also see in this window here is where to find this term in the SMQs. You see it's of course grouped into in various SMQs, in the cardiac arrhythmias SMQs and in the cardiomyopathy SMQ. I hope I could answer your question.
Thanks, Caroline. There's no other questions at this time.
Okay, so then let me go back. And here we come to the so-called MVAT, the MedDRA version analysis tool that is provided by the MSSO also for free for all MedDRA users. It's a web-based tool that you can access with, again, your user ID and the password via this URL here. And let me just summarize its functionalities. The first feature that is listed on the slide is the generation of version reports, comparing any two versions of MedDRA. So when a clinical trial is run over 5 years and you have used the starting version throughout the clinical trial, you can compare this starting version with the newest MedDRA version in order to get an idea, a feel of what has changed in between in the terminology. This feature also provides you with the option to include secondary SOC information. The second feature of the tool is the identification of changes in a specific data set that you can upload into the tool that you have already coded. Up to 100,000 rows can be uploaded, meaning the LLTs or PTs that were assigned to your verbatims. The tool will then show you the changes to those MedDRA terms between the version that was used to code the data and any MedDRA versions that you define. So this may be changes in the hierarchy, or it could be that an LLT was made non-current, etc. Again, you can include secondary SOC information if important for your retrieval purpose, but please note that there is one gap that you should be aware of. MVAT has no autocoding feature and will not identify better terms for your verbatims that became available with new MedDRA versions. This would still have to be done manually, so you would only load LLTs or PTs into the tool, not verbatims. And what is also important to know is that there are no confidentiality issues when loading your own data into the tool. The loaded data stay in your computer and are not stored after you close the MVAT session. And the third and last feature of MVAT helps identify changes to a single individual MedDRA term or code which may be relevant for the safety profile of a medicinal product, something that you can also do and retrieve by the term history function of the MedDRA browsers. And last but not least, the user interface and the report output of MVAT is available in all released MedDRA languages, of course, and MVAT also offers the ability to run reports on supplemental changes and secondary SOC linkages, or secondary SOC changes and linkage changes. MVAT is now embedded in the new web-based browser that was released in December last year, and also in the new desktop browser that was released in July. So you can directly access it from the browsers. This is how the user interface of the MVAT tool in the new web-based browser and desktop browser looks like. Here you would make a comparison between version 27.1 and 28.0 and run the report, which will provide you with a table that will show what kind of changes were implemented in the terminology between these two versions. But you can compare any two versions that you define. And this is a screenshot of the user face of the legacy MVAT. Again, less space on the screen for your searches, and the new interface is much more user-friendly. Time today does not allow for more detailed MVAT demonstration, but if you are interested, there is a very useful detailed information about the MVAT features on the MedDRA website under the header Training Material, and Tools. So there you have a full demonstration of the features and how to use it. Any questions, Leander? Additional question regarding the tools?
No additional questions, thanks, Caroline.
Okay, so then we will now cover some basics of coding with MedDRA. First, let me explain what is meant by the term coding conventions. So generally speaking, coding conventions are written guidelines for coding with MedDRA in your organization. It is crucial to have them not only for your operational tasks, for instruction of your coders, but also for inspection readiness, because inspectors ask for them and you should have them available in writing to show that all medical coders are doing their job based on defined conventions. They may address topics like handling of misspellings, abbreviations, or acronyms. Another area you may want to cover are combination terms and how to deal with them, and U2 terms, combinations of medical concepts. There may also be terms that you would always like to query, like, for example, chest pain, to find out whether it is of cardiac origin or caused by other non-cardiac events, like, for instance, pulmonary embolism. But you may also want to query reports of an unspecified infraction, because you will find these terms in MedDRA, just infraction, necrosis, occlusion, etc., in order to find out the affected body site. You may now ask yourself why such detailed instructions are actually needed. So first of all, coders may have a very different background, and they may need guidance how to handle very specific medical terms within MedDRA, with the goal to achieve, of course, accurate and consistent coding output. Also, MedDRA is very large, I've shown you, and nearly always provides a variety of coding options as compared to previous legacy terminologies. So coders need more guidance on how to prioritize and handle these options in order to achieve coding consistency, especially when they are working in different functions and geographical regions. And you may have the need for more specific coding rules for certain medical areas based on your product portfolio as well. It is often assumed that autocoders that look for a match between a verbatim and an LLT would solve all these problems. But this is not the case. So even with a very sophisticated autocoding algorithm and lots of testing, autocoders will not cover all verbatims, first of all. So manual coding will still have to be done. And secondly, autocoding results will always have to be QC'd by a qualified individual with good medical background and also sound MedDRA knowledge to ensure autocoding accuracy, because also autocoders are making mistakes. Ideally, all MedDRA users should use the same basic set of rules for their coding worldwide. Remember, MedDRA is about standardization. ICH took the initiative here and implemented the so-called M1 working group, or Points to Consider working group, with members from industry and regulators, as well as from the MSSO and JMO and the WHO as an observer. This group has compiled a Points to Consider document called MedDRA Term Selection Points to Consider. And this M1 working group, of course, is also further maintaining the document. Here a snapshot of the cover page of the current ICH Points to Consider document for MedDRA term selection for version 28.0. It provides guidance and many examples on how to perform accurate term selection using MedDRA. This guidance should be the basis for any in-house coding conventions and coding decisions within the different organizations of all MedDRA users. And thereby it provides, of course, and promotes overall coding consistency and facilitates common understanding when sharing clinical data. If you don't have in-house coding conventions, you may also use this PTC document as a coding convention, as a basis for your coding convention within your organization. You may add something or adapt some things, but you can use it as a basis for your coding conventions, or you should use it. So there should be no differences in your coding approaches as compared to what is provided in this document. The document is updated with each major MedDRA version release. That means beginning of March each year. What is important to know is that the original and comprehensive versions of the PTC documents are currently available in English, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Spanish, and Russian. And in addition, there are condensed versions of these comprehensive documents in some of the other MedDRA languages, except those where we have the full version, of course. They focus on the general principles of coding or data retrieval and presentation without going into detail on selected topics. They are not updated on a yearly basis, but on an as-needed basis, because these general principles do not change much over time. These condensed versions are available in the languages that you can see down here: Arabic, Brazilian, Portuguese, Czech, Dutch, French, German, Hungarian, Italian, and Portuguese. Both the comprehensive and the condensed versions of the Points to Consider document cover some general term selection principles. We will now look at some of these principal coding rules, but time today does not allow to address all of them in more detail. Coding is done on LLT level, the data entry level, as mentioned earlier. The LLT selected should capture as much information provided by the original verbatim as possible. So this answers one of the questions that was raised earlier. So, and as can be seen, here's an example. Reported is an abscess on the face. So do not just code to abscess, because an abscess could affect many body sites, like the brain or the lung. But code as specifically as possible by assigning LLT facial abscess, because we want to capture as much information from the report as we can. And of course, current LLTs must be used in ongoing coding, but as mentioned earlier, the non-current LLTs are still in the terminology for historical purposes to support interpretation of legacy data and also legacy data conversion. When coding, make sure to capture and appropriately classify all reported events. Do not omit medically relevant information. We are not interested in causality because it is captured elsewhere, but we should capture all reports of device-related events, product quality issues, medication errors, medical and social history, investigations and investigational results, indications for use as appropriate, depending on regulatory requirements in your region and your own coding conventions. For all coding tasks, the most important MedDRA coding principle applies: code as reported, meaning that all reported information should be captured, all medically relevant information should be captured and appropriately classified without adding or subtracting relevant information. MedDRA helps us to streamline the reported information, the reported verbatim, in a medically meaningful, standardized way. You see here the verbatim: throbbing above temple, aching all over head, pulsing pain in head, really bad headache. This all can be coded to headache. It can be streamlined. Infection in lungs can be coded to lung infection, fully covering what has been reported. And here we have a patient took drug A instead of drug B and experienced hypertension. Do not omit any information. Cover the fact that the patient took the wrong drug by wrong drug administered, because the patient took it. And then also the subsequent adverse event, the hypertension. I've mentioned already that the first part of the full PTC document focuses on the general principles for coding. The second part of the PTC document, that is not contained in the condensed versions, only in the comprehensive versions of the document, addresses specific coding topics, individual types of data, and how to handle them in operational coding. And as you can see here, the list of topics is quite comprehensive, with points like diagnosis and provisional diagnosis with or without signs and symptoms, death and other patient outcomes, age, how to prioritize age versus event specificity, how to handle combination terms, how to prioritize body site versus event specificity, congenital terms, investigations, and the list continues here with medication errors, accidental exposures, occupational exposures, misuse, abuse, addiction, social circumstances, off-label use, product quality issues. So a long list of specific coding scenarios. If you are not familiar with the document yet, I can only highly recommend to read the document to make yourself familiar with the content, so that you know where to find guidance for these coding scenarios. And of course, you should be very much familiar with the content if you are responsible for your own in-house coding conventions, in order to make sure that your coding conventions do not contradict the rules and the guidance provided in the PTC document here. The table provides now a summary of the available ICH guidance documents, the points to consider. Here is the MedDRA term selection points to consider document we were talking about. So the comprehensive version in these languages that is updated annually, then the shorter condensed versions in the I've shown you the languages that are available here, and these are updated as needed. And then we have the second points to consider document for data retrieval and presentation purposes. Here it is. Like for the coding guidance, here we have the comprehensive versions that are updated annually, and also the condensed versions. Same as with the coding guidances, they are available in several languages and updated as needed. The responsible ICH working group also provides a so-called companion document that provides even more detailed information and more examples for coding topics that are of regulatory interest. It is available in English and Japanese only, and it is a living document that is updated as needed. The document covers the topics coding of medication errors and data quality issues. It also includes a section on product quality issues, not only data quality issues, but product quality issues for distributed products reported in the clinical setting. So when the product is already used in the medication use process. And a new section addressing deviations or non-conformances during the manufacturing process and quality system issues was added in version 3.0 of the document that was released in September last year. So this new version also includes updates of the pre-existing sections. So now let me again show you where to find these documents. Here we are again on the MedDRA website, how to use, again, support documentation. Here we are. We have looked into the introductory guides for both for MedDRA. There's also an introductory guide for the standardized MedDRA queries. And here you find the points to consider document right on the top. The MedDRA term selection points to consider document in different formats. The MedDRA data retrieval and presentation document, again in different formats, and then also always a redlined version that indicates the changes as compared to the previous version of the document, and the points to consider document as well, the companion document as well, as I've just mentioned, the one that addresses very specific topics that are of regulatory interest. Product quality issues, medication errors, product use issues, and data quality issues. So, any questions related to the coding topic?
We had one question, thanks Caroline. And I know you've mentioned conventions and coding principles, but we had a question that said, at the end of the study that I'm doing, should I report every single adverse event that occurred during this clinical study using MedDRA browsers?
So the MedDRA browser is only used for coding purposes. Reporting is done via different channels. But the question, I think that what you mean is what version should be used. So you would always you would have to upversion your data. If you haven't done so during the trial, you would need to upversion your data to really use the most recent version of MedDRA in order to, before closing your database, your study database. So, and there you could use MWAT, for instance, in order to support this this upversioning process. And how you do this, whether you only replace the non-current LLTs and then add the new hierarchy to it, or whether you really take the effort to look for better fitting terms, better fitting PTs that became available over the versions, then this is really depending on your own processes. This is your decision. There are different versioning approaches that you can take, and they are very nicely explained again in the MedDRA best practices document here. So just refer the MedDRA best practices in order to better understand how the versioning approach can be handled when it comes to different versions that were used in the pharmacovigilance database and also within a clinical study. Any further questions?
We had one more, but not specific to this part of the presentation. If there's time at the end, I'll ask it. Thank you.
Okay. So then let's start with the standardized MedDRA query, our last topic for today. So quite soon after MedDRA was more widely used, it became obvious that standard queries were needed for conditions that are relevant in the context of medicinal product use. Before the provision of the SMQs, different PTs were selected and used for providing retrieval results to regulatory agencies for the same medical condition, like, for example, hepatic damage. So something had to be done, and the concept of the standardized MedDRA queries was born. With the SMQs, industry and regulators can perform searches for a specific condition in the same way, allowing for a valid comparison of safety findings between different databases and for different products. Again, MedDRA is all about standardization, harmonization. Like any other query, the SMQs represent term groupings related to medical conditions or an area of interest, in the majority of cases from more than one MedDRA SOC. They contain terms for clinical signs and symptoms, diagnosis, syndromes, physical findings, lab values, other test data, etc. And of course, they intend to support case identification in your databases. But the SMQs are standardized ones that are pre-built for you. SMQs are constructed at MedDRA PT level, but the LLTs underneath these PTs, of course, are also included. They are automatically included. How does a query work? How would you run an SMQ? So let me illustrate this using this image here, this graph. If we start from the left-hand side, you see that we will start out with a clinical trial or drug safety database. And these databases contain cases with events coded to MedDRA LLTs. So we could have a list of LLTs assigned to reported events for each particular patient. Now let's look at the right-hand side. A query is built on the PT level. It may be a standardized MedDRA query or a query we have built. Ultimately, a query is a list of PTs we think represent the condition of interest, because the cases in our database are coded to LLTs. The PTs of our query are also get broken down to LLTs, and then when running a query, a matching process takes place, looking for a hit or match between the LLTs of our list and the LLTs used for coding the cases in your database. And then if a match is found, that case will be retrieved from the database, and it will be shown as a potentially relevant case for further medical assessment, because it's not proven that this will truly be a relevant case. These cases must all be reviewed and assessed by a product expert, somebody who is able to look into the case and then really identify whether this case is relevant for the specific question that is to be answered via the query. I've shown already that the ICH M1 expert working group also provides a PTC document that covers topics related to retrieval and presentation of MedDRA-coded data. And here is a snapshot of the front cover of the latest version that was released in March this year. And it is called MedDRA Data Retrieval and Presentation Points to Consider. It provides data retrieval and presentation options for industry or regulatory purposes, and should, of course, be used in conjunction with the PTC document for MedDRA term selection, because accurate and consistent MedDRA coding is a crucial prerequisite for reliable and reproducible data output. And finally, internal approaches and processes for data retrieval and analysis should not be in conflict with what is outlined in this document. Same holds true for the coding guidance, of course. With version 28.0, a total of 110 level 1 SMQs are in production. Here you have a few of them on the screen, and you can see that these are typical topics in drug development and pharmacovigilance that you would search for, typical drug-related adverse reactions. You will find medical conditions like hypersensitivity, hepatic disorders, convulsions, etc. But you will also find topics like lack of drug effect or medication errors. So make yourself familiar with the topics that are covered by the SMQs to be able to use them for queries in your database. Because this way you will not be surprised by a letter from a regulator pointing at a specific safety issue of your product, because regulators do use SMQs on a regular basis for safety signaling in their databases. So this slide summarizes the benefits and limitations of the SMQs. The benefits of using an SMQ is that they can be applied across multiple therapeutic areas. They are not product or drug class specific. They are validated and rigorously tested before release, usually at least in one industry and one regulatory database. They are reusable and allow for standardized communication of safety information between pharmaceutical companies and regulators. They also allow for consistency in the way data retrievals are set up and run, so companies and regulators would look for a condition in the same way. The other big benefit is efficiency, because the SMQs are maintained and versioned centrally by the MSSO and JMO, and thereby reducing the amount of work to be done on your side, on your part. However, there are some limitations that you should be aware of. First of all, not all medical topics or safety issues are covered by the SMQs, so there will still be scenarios where you have to build your own query, and that is why it is important that you know how to do it. After release into production, SMQs further evolve and undergo further refinement, even though they have been extensively tested during the development. It is only when they are put into production and subscribers start using them that they provide feedback via the change request process based on their experience. They may have noticed that some terms may be missing in the SMQ, and they think they should be included, or other PTs may produce too much noise, retrieving a lot of irrelevant cases. So users may therefore ask to make the respective PTs inactive. So, excuse me, the SMQs are not stable, You can submit change requests, and of course, they are also adapted based on MedDRA versioning, adding new relevant PTs to the SMQ. At first, SMQs were only used in the post-marketing area, but it was quickly realized that they are helpful for broader use. SMQs can be utilized in clinical trials for screening when the safety profile is not fully established. Or a specific SMQ can be used for case identification to check whether there is a safety issue based on preclinical data or based on a known class effect, for instance. In post-marketing, selected SMQs can be used to retrieve cases for suspected or known safety issues. They can be applied for signal detection, even using all SMQs in large data sets. Also, single case alerts can be programmed that flag cases where the assigned code matches a PT of a specific SMQ as an early warning system. And SMQs can also be used for periodic reporting to aggregate cases for safety issues or other issues like lack of efficacy. Any questions, Leander?
Not on this at the moment, but I have the one left over from earlier.
Okay.
But
Yeah. So let me only shortly show you the browser. I have to log in again. Here we are. And we will now look into the SMQ view here. And you see all the SMQs listed in alphabetical order. You can open them and you see the red circle here means this PT has been made inactive, so should not be used for retrieval purposes anymore. You see blue lettering, red lettering. This is something special. Very specific terms are the so-called narrow terms, terms that increase the sensitivity of the search are called broad terms. They are in red lettering. And here we see additional categories added to the PTs. Again, very specific. It is explained in the SMQ webinar. This is a algorithmic SMQ. So this is how you can approach or explore the SMQs. If you click on an SMQ name, you will get some basic information as SMQ description, very basic, what sources were used in order to come up with this SMQ, and also a note. And here you see acute pancreatitis is an algorithmic SMQ and an explanation how to use the algorithm. So just shortly, you can also again look into different languages and into different versions. So this is how you can use the SMQ view of the browser. I have to speed up a little bit. Just one last question for you. PTs that are included in a query may relate to lab results, test results, diagnosis, toxicologic issues, clinical syndromes, clinical symptoms, histopathology findings, physical findings, medical surgical procedures, medical social family history, clinical signs, specific types of death and sudden death, diagnostic and imaging procedure findings. Yes, you're fully right. All of them are included. All of them have to be considered. So you would retrieve cases where such terms were assigned to the adverse events in a patient, and then will retrieve the case and assess whether this is a truly relevant case for your specific question. Thank you for joining. So this is a summary of what we have addressed today. And this is the last chance for questions. There was one question, Leander.
Yes, there was a question. It was in relation to AI, and it was a general question, so
Yeah.
it's not really part of the training. But with AI on the rise, with will the MSSO consider in the future um, and proper funding to expand the LLTs or create sub-level, e.g., verbatim terms, to include more verbatim terms that can standardize data entry from real-world experience reports?
Oh, that's a very
I
different,
know. It's a very
difficult
long.
questions. Yeah, AI is in everybody's discussing the AI, and some companies are already using AI for autocoding purposes. We will see what the future brings. I cannot tell anything about it so
No,
far.
what I wrote back is what we gave at the Warsaw MedDRA user group meeting, where um, we we're looking at how best to use AI internally for MedDRA maintenance and enhancements, as well as applying for AI for the benefits of the end user. But we can't give specifics as it stands at the moment.
Yeah, again, exactly.
But
Any
otherwise, I think you've answered all the questions that are there at the moment. Unless anyone's got any more that they want to type in at the last minute, I can't see any unanswered questions, Carol Ann.
Okay, so then let me just show you these links here to the website. You saw that there's a lot of information on the website. Always make yourself familiar, because you will find a lot of useful information in there. If you have questions, you can always contact our help desk. There's an FAQ section also on the MedDRA website, where you may find answers to your own questions. Again, the links to the MedDRA browsers, to the change request tool, and to the training schedule, where you find information about the planned face-to-face classes and the webinars as well, and a link to the MedDRA support documentation. I've shown you where to find this MedDRA support documentations, PTC documents, and intro guides on the website. This is what you find on the schedule page for the training when you select the webinars. So these are the webinars that are scheduled for September and October. It's updated on a continuous basis. For the MedDRA coding basics, as one example, you see it's provided in different languages: English, Spanish, Korean, also in Chinese, in French. So look out for them. These are some that are provided in English for the data analysis and query building and the standardized MedDRA query topic. So they will be provided in September. And in addition to that, the latest addition to our training offerings is the so-called Learning Management System, or LMS, that was launched beginning of this year. It provides a controlled environment for self-learning via videos, and it guides users through a predefined learning path. There are beginners and advanced levels you can choose from, and also certificate and non-certificate tracks. And important to know, the number of accounts per organization is unlimited. So here are a few topics that are covered in an LMS: MedDRA coding and analysis, and for the coding part, specific topics like outcomes, suicide, social circumstances, pregnancy topics, and also interactive MedDRA coding options are available within the tool. And here is the QR code, how to access the tool, either by scanning this QR code or by entering this web address on the top of your internet browser. Here it is. Now, I wanted to show you our YouTube channel. Here it is. If you click on Contact on the MedDRA website, where you also find the web-based browser, Contact, this page will open. And let me show you. On the website, I click on Contact, and then click on this YouTube icon here, and then you will find all recorded sessions of the different trainers different languages, so that you can choose your preferred language, your preferred trainer, and look for the recorded webinars. Um, for instance, here of our colleague Nicole, MedDRA coding basics, medication errors, query building, MedDRA queries, tool demonstration, MedDRA browsers, etc. So this can be a very useful source if you are not able to join a session um, because of time constraints. So there you have the option to really either readdress content because you want to learn a bit more or memorize some of the topics that you have already attended, the webinar that you have attended already, or also look into a webinar of another colleague because everybody has a different style of presentation. So this was all for today. Sorry for overrunning the time a bit. But it's really sometimes difficult to address all the questions, and we also had these problems at the beginning of the presentation. So sorry for that. But fortunately, everything worked well afterwards. So with this, um, I really hope that you found this webinar useful and hope to meet you again in one of the other training offers during this year. Thank you for your interest in today's topic and also your active participation in the polls and also your questions. We always like to get these questions. And again, thank you also to you, Leander, for your support today, for answering the questions, addressing them with me, and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye
Thank
for
you,
now,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank
Bye
you.
bye.